the second session, part 2 of our public information session for our water quality restoration grants. Just wanted a reminder that the grants are open. We are accepting proposals. Proposals need to be submitted by June 2nd. Some housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded. By participating, you consent to the recording. This recording will be made available on our website and our YouTube channel. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, title, and email address. For questions, please raise your hand during our question and comment session, which will be after all of the presentations. Please kindly mute your microphone to minimize background noise, especially during presentations. I will not be the one that's presenting today. We have a number of speakers to present on different items. This is our agenda for today. The purpose of this meeting is to go into further detail about information that is required to be submitted in our proposal, and to help give you helpful guidance, and to also provide you with information that can be found to give you guidance as you submit your proposal. I wanted to introduce our staff. I didn't introduce myself, so I will do it now. I'm Catherine Schaefer. I'm the Bureau Manager for the Bureau of Watershed Management. Kimberly Todash is my Section Chief. In my fiscal staff, I have Jennifer Nublayhouse, who will be presenting next, Roxanne Frederick, Ann Elizabeth Youssef, and then we have our grant management staff, which is Natalie Young, Fariva Assad, Rebecca Ackley, Amelia Yates, Rosemary Brown, and Lauren Holleran. And a number of our staff will be presenting today, so you'll get to meet them. Our timeline, like I had said, our RFP was released. It is accepting applications right now. This is our second public information session. I also want to point out our first public information session is on our website. If you missed it, please see the website and you can watch the video. This public information session is not identical to what was presented previously. The previous presentation was more of a overall of what is in the RFP, and it can be viewed on our website, as well as the slide presentation is on the website as well. This presentation, like the agenda says, is going into a little bit more detail about specific required items in the RFP document to further assist you when you're preparing your proposals. Proposals are due on June 2nd. It's 11:59 p.m. on June 2nd. After they are submitted, the DEP then scores the proposals, and we will be then awarding our funding recommendations on September 30th. After the funding recommendations, before we go into our grant agreement stage, which is not on this timeline, we will have grant managers reaching out to those that are being awarded funding, because we may want further detail and further information to make sure that everything is in order for the grant agreement stage. If you have already received a grant, if you're an existing grantee, you know that it's a little bit of a back and forth at that time. We may have different budget information details that needs to be expanded upon. So we like to make sure that that's all in there. We will have another information session specifically for grantees after the funding awards are announced, and then grant execution, and then we work with you. So again, this is next steps. Okay, so next up is Jennifer Nublayhouse, which will be discussing budget details.
Thanks, Catherine. I will share my screen now. Can you see this?
Not yet, but it's loading. Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Again, my name is Jennifer Nublayhouse. I don't know if a lot of probably a lot of you have received emails from me or talked to me, but I am in charge of the fiscal portion of the grant, and as part of the grant and part of the grant agreements, my concern is the budget and the budget details. So everything stems from it. So I want to go over what's required in the application and then the budget details page of the application. So today I will go over each category in the budget details page of the application. And this guidance document is found on the Appendix C of the RFP on our website. So this document shows you examples of how you should enter the budget justification. And we want you to show us how you calculated each amount that you put for each category. And then please be mindful that what you put in your budget details, please look at the financial report backup documentation that will be required if you are awarded a grant. And that financial report guidance document is listed in Appendix G of the RFP. So let's go through each category. If I can, yeah, here we go. So this is the salary category, and there are two types depending on if you want to provide hourly rates or salaries. So these two tables illustrate what information is needed for each type. If you want to provide hourly wages, we will need the name and the employee name, the title, if known, total hours they will devote to this grant, their hourly rates, and the total amount that they will receive. For the salary employees, you will indicate their annual salary, the percentage of time they will work on the grant per year, the number of years of the grant, and then the total amount. And please make sure that the calculations match exactly the total amount you enter into Sage. This is important. The next is fringe category. So for every employee you have at the organization, there is a corresponding fringe. We will need to know the employee's name or title, the total amount that they will receive for this project, your fringe rates, and then the total amount of fringe for that employee. And this information will be needed for each employee listed in your salary category. The next is the contractor or subcontractor category. So third parties and consultants should be put into this category. If you know you're a subcontractor or contractor, please put in the company name and detail what work they will perform, and then the estimated costs for the work. If the company is not known, you could put TBD, to be determined, but you would still need to describe the work that you want this contractor to perform and the estimated cost you have set aside for this work. Next is supplies category. This category is only for the cost incurred by the grantee. So if the grantee is buying the supplies, we will need to know what you will be purchasing and how many, the estimated cost for that supply, why you are purchasing this, and then the total amount. But if the costs are incurred by the subcontractor, then it should be put into the subcontractor category under their cost. The next category is monitoring. Again, this is only cost incurred by the grantee. You will let us know what type of monitoring will be performed, the total amount, purpose for this monitoring. If you are hiring a lab to do lab analysis, then the lab company should be put in the subcontractor category. But if you are, as a grantee, are performing the lab analysis on your own, then it should be under this monitoring category. The next category is the training category. We will need to know the type of training that will be involved, whether it be a conference, a training for the public. We need to know the amount for the training, and then a cost breakdown of how you derived at the training cost. Is there facility fees? I don't know if you're charging any other fees, but please note that food purchases are not allowed to be reimbursed by this grant. So please be mindful of this restriction. Okay, the next category is travel. You will indicate the type of travel, the mileage rate, estimated miles for the project, and the total amount for this travel. Please be mindful that in the RFP, we list the state rate as 47 cents per mile, and this rate is used for the duration of the grants. Even if the state rate changes, you must stick with the 47 cents per mile. The next category is audits. If you need an audit, we will need to know who will be doing the auditing and how much it will cost. The next category is indirect. So indirect costs are not required as part of the grant, but if you need it, it is available. Indirect cost covers a portion of the grantee's general overhead costs, like office toner, cartridges, printer paper, lighting, general office expenses. But if any supplies or office supplies are directly related to the project, then you have to put it in the supply category. But other like general expenses can be put under indirect, and indirect costs are calculated as a percentage of modified total direct costs, which includes salaries, wages, fringe, materials, supplies, services, travel, and up to the first 25,000 of each subcontract. You don't have to use all of these categories to calculate the MTDCs, but you will need to specify which categories you do use and show us the calculation of how you derived at that amount. I do want to point out that MTDCs do not include equipment, capital expenditures, rental costs, scholarships, and fellowships, or the rest of each subcontract if it's above 25,000. So overall, once you determine the categories that you want to use in the MTDCs, you will add up the category expenses and then multiply it by the indirect rate or NICR rate to calculate the total indirect cost. And then if a grantee has a NICR rate, a federally negotiated rate, you must provide us with the documentation for this rate. If you do have a NICR rate but want to use a lower rate, you must have your financial office provide us with a memo approving the lower rates. And then you can upload these documents in the supplemental attachments page of the application. But if you don't have a NICR rate, you can use the baseline rate of 10%. And then the next category is other. If your expenses don't fit in the other categories I mentioned, then you can add it to this category. Next is match. This is something new. Match is not required for this grant application and is not part of the scoring criteria. So if you do choose to include match, we have two types, in-kind and cash. In-kind match is strictly volunteer time or equipment donation only. All other match fall into the cash match category. Again, in-kind match is volunteer time only. The volunteers don't get paid. There is no money being exchanged. And for this, we will need to know the name of the volunteer, if known, or the estimated number of volunteers, what the volunteers will do, the total number of hours they will service, the hourly rates, and this hourly rate is usually the national volunteer rates that you can Google online. And then if you want to provide an hourly rate that's different from that national rate, then you would have to provide documentation to justify or verify that hourly rates for that person. And then the total amounts. If you have an equipment donation, then you can provide us with the type of equipment, the daily rates, the number of days, and then the total amount. And for the daily rate, you must provide us with documentation to show us how you derived at that daily rate. The next category is cash match. This is for all other matches, such as employee match or the subcontractor matches. You would still have to provide us with how you calculated the amounts. So you would have to name who the person is, what they will provide, service will be provided, their number of hours, their hourly rates. So it's the same type of information that we needed for the grant funding. Same as the subcontractor. If the subcontractor's matching, then you would provide who that subcontractor is, what services they will provide, and then the total amounts that they will provide. And then we have the other funding category. And this is funding that is not part of grant funding. It's not part of match. It's other type of funding that you want to let us know about. And then that's all. That's my contact information if you have any questions. And this is the end of my presentation. So I guess I can pass it on to the watershed restoration application presentation.
Yes. Lauren
Okay.
Holleran. Lauren Holleran will be presenting the next two. Natalie will be presenting the watershed restoration app, but Lauren's taking care of it. Thank you, Lauren.
Of course, no problem. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Halloran, and I am a grant manager in the Bureau of Watershed Management with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. In the following slides, I'll walk you through the permitting process and highlight key aspects to be aware of. Just to give you a quick overview, we will begin by discussing information required before the permit process begins. This includes how to determine if a permit is required, the Office of Permitting and Project Navigation, or OPPN checklist, and steps to scheduling a pre-application meeting. After, we will go into the steps of the permit process and end with how to waive a permit application fee. So, before you think about the permit process, the first question you should ask yourself is, do I need a permit? If there is no permit needed, then there is no need to go through the steps of the permit process. To determine if a permit is needed, you must know two important pieces of information: what activities your grant will accomplish and where those activities will be performed. Without this basic information, you will not be able to determine if permits are required for your project. One thing to keep in mind early on is that the entire permitting process can take up to 6 months to be completed, and no regulated activities can start until all necessary permits have been obtained. This should be reflected in your proposed timeframe when submitting an application. Quickly, I wanted to highlight a new document that is available on our website, the Guidance Document for Determining Permit Applicability. This guidance document is intended to provide clarity for grantees on the process for determining whether your grant requires Land Resource Protection, LRP, permits. By following this guidance, you will facilitate a streamlined application process and ensure that the necessary permits are obtained in a timely manner. The link for this document is included in this presentation. The next question you might be asking yourself is, how do I determine if a permit is required? I will guide you through the process of determining whether an LRP permit is necessary for your project. We will be discussing flood hazard control permits and freshwater wetland permits, as they are the most common LRP permits we encounter. The first step in determining permit applicability is to compile a comprehensive list of all activities to be undertaken throughout the duration of your project. Once this list is completed, you can review the Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules and the Freshwater Wetland Protection Act rules to determine if the proposed activities are regulated by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. The picture shown on the left-hand side of this slide are what the pages will look like, the top being for the Freshwater Wetland Protection Act rules and the bottom being for the Flood Hazard Area rules. If after reading through, you find your proposed activities are not regulated, then your grant will not require flood hazard area or freshwater wetland permits. But if your proposed activities are regulated, then you can continue your investigation to determine if your activities fall within a flood hazard area or freshwater wetland. This next step in the investigation will help you to determine if your activity is within a regulated area, and to be more specific for this example, if your proposed activity falls within a flood hazard area or freshwater wetlands. A useful tool that can help you determine if you're performing an activity in a regulated area is the Watershed Restoration application. The WR app can also aid in determining if your site contains any special environmental areas, for example, US EPA priority wetlands. To utilize this application, you will need to obtain the block and lot numbers for all areas where your grant activity will occur. I will now play a video to demonstrate how to use the layers in the WR application. What's a takeaway from this video is if any portion of your site falls within a flood hazard area or freshwater wetlands, it may require a flood hazard area or freshwater wetlands permit. If a flood hazard area or freshwater wetland area does not fall within your site, then you can conclude that your project will not require a flood hazard area or freshwater wetlands permit. You can repeat this process for all block and lots that are involved with your grant. One quick thing to note is that there are additional permits available beyond those outlined in this presentation. However, the permits discussed here represent the most commonly issued. You can reference the NJDEP Watershed and Land Management permit types and WLM Current Laws and Regulation website pages for additional information. A link for these references is included in this presentation. Now that you have completed your investigation and you see that your grant contains a regulated activity and is located in a regulated area, you should be thinking that you need a permit of some kind. It is important to have all information required on the OPPN checklist, also known as the Permit Readiness Checklist, before moving forward with anything else. This checklist helps OPPN determine if or what possible permits are required and which NJDEP departments are applicable in the determination process. Key things to note that are required by this checklist are site plans, a narrative description of the proposed project, proposed location, proposed activities, proposed schedule, proposed funding, and aerial photos. This checklist is required not only for the pre-application meeting, but the grant application as well. The picture on the slide shows a screenshot of the first page of the checklist. The link to the checklist is in this presentation and will be available to you. Another thing to keep in mind, I have referenced the LRP freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area permits and mentioned that there are others to look out for. This permit readiness checklist goes through the different groups and asks questions to help gauge what permits may be applicable. For example, it mentions New Jersey Fish and Wildlife, NJDEP stormwater permitting, and the Bureau of Surface Water and Pretreatment Permitting, among others. Taking the time to go through this checklist will help to ensure that any permits applicable for your project are obtained. If after your investigation, you are still not certain if your proposed activities are regulated and require a permit, you can schedule a pre-application meeting with LRP or the appropriate permitting program to clarify the requirements. To schedule a pre-application meeting, contact OPPN or your grant manager if applicable. If you have a grant manager, inquire whether they will be coordinating the meeting or if you should arrange the pre-application meeting directly through OPPN. If it is determined that you are responsible for arranging the pre-application meeting, begin the process by sending OPPN the information required in the Permit Readiness Checklist. OPPN will notify you if additional information is required and assist in coordinating a suitable date and time for the meeting. If you have a grant manager, inform them of the scheduled meeting so they can attend. If your grant manager coordinates the pre-application meeting, provide them with all the required information on the Permit Readiness Checklist. They will inform you of the available date and times for a meeting. But let's say that once you've completed your investigation, you believe that you've correctly determined the necessary permits for your grant. Confirmation with LRP is still required. To do this, send your grant manager the list of permits you believe are necessary, along with all the information outlined in the Permit Readiness Checklist. Your grant manager will then contact the appropriate DEP permit program and request confirmation of the required permits for your grant. Once, for this scenario, LRP has confirmed the appropriate permit or permits required for your project, let's move on to the next step, the permit process. The WLM permit process, as shown in the picture on the left-hand side of this slide, breaks up the permitting process into 4 parts. The first part is to prepare an application. This is a step for you, the grantee, to complete. When you have been advised what permits are required for your project by LRP, you can prepare an application to apply for those permits. Be sure to include all required documentation to ensure a smooth review process. If you have any questions about the application, please feel free to reach out to your grant manager for clarification. Once you have finished the permit application, you can proceed to the next step, step 2, which is an administrative review. For this step, you would send your permit application to your grant manager. There, they would confirm documentation and get the permit application fee waived. We will go into more detail on that process later in the presentation. Once your grant manager sends the application back to you, you could proceed to the third step, which is the technical review. For this step, you would send the application over to LRP, where they would do their environmental and engineering review. Once their review of the application is complete, proceed to the final step, step 4, the permit decision. The permit decision is where LRP or the appropriate DEP permit program either confirms or denies your request for a permit. Now that we have gone through the permit process from start to finish, I want to bring to your attention where in the grant application on Sage you will be filling out the permitting information. It is located under the Project Details tab. As you can see from this picture on the slide, the first thing asked for is the Permit Readiness Checklist, which is a requirement for the application. This is to get the grantee to start thinking about the need for a permit at the early stages of the project, so the proper time is allotted to obtaining them. Next, it asks if you think the project will require or anticipate the need for permits. You can select yes or no. If you select yes, it will then ask you what type of permits would be required. By utilizing the resources mentioned above or having prior experience with your type of project, you can input what permits you think are required. This does not make them set in stone. As more information is obtained, the type of permit may change. Additionally, remember that no matter what kind of permit you think you need, it must be confirmed with the Watershed Restoration Grant Unit first before applying for the permit. This is just to give us an idea of what permits may be needed, and again, to get you to start thinking about what permits your project may require. Lastly, it asks if any permits have already been approved, and if so, for you to list the permit/file number. Input this information if applicable. The final thing to mention about permitting is that the DEP can be listed as a co-applicant on the permit application, and the application fee can be waived. This was referenced in step 2 of the permit process. You will need to send the complete permit application to your grant manager. Then they will ensure the signatures required are obtained to waive the fee. This must be done prior to the submittal of the permit application to the appropriate DEP permit program. If it is sent to them first, then we cannot add our signature and the application fee will not be waived. To clarify, the permit application fees cannot be paid for by 319H or 604B grant funds, but the permit application fee for a NJDEP permit can be waived by listing the DEP as a co-applicant. A few things to keep in mind. The permit must be an NJDEP permit. If it is an outside permit, the application fee cannot be waived. County permits are considered external and do not qualify. And lastly, just to reiterate, the required documents must be sent to us, your grant manager, before you apply for the permit. We have included this helpful resource slide to have the various links that were referenced throughout the presentation all in one place. These resources will be extremely helpful to you in the permitting process. This PowerPoint will be made available on our website for your reference. Lastly, on this slide, we have Natalie Young's contact information as well as our Watershed Restoration Grants email. Additionally, there is a link to our Permit Applicability Frequently Asked Questions document. If you have any questions, please refer to the FAQ document. If you have more specific grant application questions regarding the permitting process, you can reach out to Natalie Young or the Watershed Restoration Grants email, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. If you already have a designated grant manager, please reach out to them regarding your individual questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we will have Amelia Yates give a presentation on QAP.
All right, can everybody see this?
It's loading. It's loading. At least on my end, it's still loading. Okay, I can see.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everybody. My name is Amelia Yates, and I am a grant manager with the DEP. Today, I will be telling you all about Quality Assurance Project Plans, aka QAPs, and highlighting some of the new changes within this RFP. During this presentation, we will go over all the aspects of QAPs. What is a QAP? How is it changed within the SAGE system? And what project activities specifically require a QAP? Afterwards, we will discuss how to utilize the DEP QAP template to make the QAP process easier and the general QAP approval timeline. We also have compiled some helpful resources that may aid you during the QAP creation process. First and foremost, we must define what a Quality Assurance Project Plan is. Abbreviated as QAP, a QAP is a document that outlines how data will be collected, measured, and managed in a grant project. A QAP is a plan that's required whenever someone is collecting or using information about the environment, like measuring air, water, or soil. Think of a QAP as a roadmap that ensures the specific project activity is carried out with high standards for accuracy, reliability, and consistency. For any grant project funded by the NJDEP, the QAP helps to make sure that the information gathered is trustworthy and can be used for important decisions. It lays out the methods, procedures, and quality checks that will be followed, helping to protect the environment and public health by ensuring the data is of the highest quality. Essentially, the QAP guarantees that the project follows a plan that everyone involved can agree upon, and the results will be credible. According to the EPA guidance for quality assurance project plans, QAPs are required for all work performed on or behalf of the EPA involving the collection, production, evaluation, or use of environmental information and the design, construction, operation, or application of environmental technology. Environmental information includes data and information that describe environmental processes or conditions. The language pictured on this slide is taken directly from the EPA QAP standards document. Please review the document when determining if your activities require a QAP when completing the SAGE application. The document by the EPA is linked on this slide. We will also be providing today's slides to you as a reference, so you will have access to all links provided. As of April, there are new changes to our SAGE application, one of which includes a newly added QAP page. Previously, SAGE only included one question regarding QAPs. Quote, will this project have water quality monitoring that will require a QAP? Which you would answer with a yes or a no. Now, as you see here, we've included a brand new page to make the QAP process easier. This will allow you, the grantee, to determine whether a QAP is needed during the grant application process. As with the other sections on SAGE, this new page can be found under the Forms menu. The picture on the right of this slide is what the new QAP page looks like. You will go through the provided list and see what activities, if any, fall under your project scope of work. If there are activities that fall under your project scope of work, you will check off the corresponding box and answer the bottom question as yes. If none apply to your project, you would check off not applicable and answer the bottom question as no. We've prepared a brief video to show you the QAP process on SAGE. Just be aware that there is no narration to this video. So as you can see, if you select yes on SAGE, you will list the activities of your project that require a QAP in the box. If you select no, you will describe why your project does not require a QAP and provide justification. Now we will be dissecting the specific activities that require a QAP. First, projects that take direct measurements of environmental parameters or processes. This means physically measuring things such as air quality, water quality, or temperature to get real data about the environment. Second, we have analytical testing results of environmental conditions such as geophysical or hydrological conditions. These are things we can measure that tell us about the state of the environment or how it's affecting us. For example, things like the level of pollutants in water or the amount of harmful chemicals in the air. Third is information on physical parameters or processes collected using environmental technologies. Environmental technology is defined by the EPA as including systems, devices, and their components applicable to both hardware and methods or techniques that measure and/or remove pollutants or contaminants and/or prevent them from entering the environment. Some examples of environmental technologies as defined by the EPA are pollution prevention, which can include measurement, monitoring, reduction, control, and/or treatment processes. Examples of this include wet scrubbers and filters. Contamination, which is containment to prevent further movement of contaminants, such as capping or biological treatment. Storage containers, methods, or facilities, such as drums, tanks, and ponds or lagoons. And remediation processes, such as soil washing, pump and treatment, soil vapor extraction, and land farming. And now we move on to our fourth activity requiring a QUAP, which is information provided by models. This refers to data or insights generated through tools such as predictive or statistical models. They help track progress, forecast potential outcomes, and support evidence-based decisions throughout the duration of the project. Examples include the use of PLET or STEP-L, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Now we move on to our last four activities. Fifth is design, construction, and operation or application of environmental technology. Again, we see environmental technology here. Environmental technology in this scenario is different than what we previously spoke about. This is in relation to the designing or the creation of environmental technology. You may need to create environmental technology to be able to collect your data for your project. We previously defined environmental technologies, but for more information regarding environmental technology, you can refer to the EPA QUAP standards or the EPA's guidance on quality assurance for environmental technology design, construction, and operation. Both resources are provided on the helpful resources slide of this PowerPoint, which is a bit later on in this presentation. The sixth activity is information or compiled or obtained from databases, software applications, decision support tools, websites, existing literature, and other sources. The information compiled is intended for use in any form of analysis. If you are using sources, such as referencing a research paper, you need to provide this information to the NJDEP to ensure it is a credible source. Databases are in reference to anything other than ones previously approved by the EPA. This can include utilizing your own database or utilizing information from past projects that were not previously approved. The seventh activity is the development of environmental software, tools, models, methods, and applications. This can include tools like the NJDEP water restoration application we previously discussed. If you are creating an application such as this, the data would have to be verified. Finally, we proceed to the eighth activity, performing calculations or analyses based on environmental information. Environmental information includes all data covered in the previous 7 steps. Previously, we discussed what activities require a QUAP. Now, we will talk about the activities that do not require a QUAP. It's important to note that this list does not encompass all activities that do not require a QUAP, only the most common ones we typically come across. Starting off, projects in which calculations are being done, but only for engineering or design construction purposes do not require a QUAP. This means that any calculations that are completed are solely used to aid in the design of the project and will not be included in any final reporting. Next, projects that use pollution load estimation tool, aka PLET, but are not doing pre or post project monitoring do not require a QUAP. I'm sure some of you are familiar with PLET, but just to give a quick definition, PLET is a planning level-based web model used to estimate long-term nutrient and sediment loads from different land uses and the load reductions resulting from the implementation of best management practices. Some other activities that do not require QUAPs include projects that use STEP-L before the project is implemented. STEP-L is a user-friendly interface that can be used to evaluate loading and load reductions at a variety of scales. And lastly, any grants that are purely educational. The data collected in these cases is not intended for analysis and therefore does not require a QUAP. Now we will talk about the DEP QUAP template. The Office of Quality Assurance has created a QUAP template which is used to aid in the QUAP drafting process. The Office of Quality Assurance administers the department's quality assurance program and has the responsibility to ensure that environmental data is generated, compiled, and reviewed using specific quality assurance and quality control measures. The Office of Quality Assurance and the Watershed Restoration Grants Unit collaborate to develop and review QUAPs. Pictured on this slide is the first page of the DEP QUAP template, which details the basic instructions for filling out the document for your specific project. The purpose of this document is to help expedite QUAP development, review, and the approval process. It was designed following the organizational structure established in the EPA quality assurance documents, which includes the EPA QUAP standard document we previously discussed, as well as the EPA guidance for quality assurance project plans, which are both also linked on the helpful resources slide of this PowerPoint. It is important to note that this document may not be inclusive of all requirements contained within the EPA quality assurance documents referenced and does not supplant any requirements contained therein. Now we will review the general QUAP approval process. The first step is submission of your draft QUAP to your grant manager via email. Following this step is the initial grant manager review. So once you send your first draft of your QUAP to your grant manager, they will review it and send it back to you for any modifications if needed. If your grant manager does not identify any modifications needed, your grant manager will then send your draft to the Office of Quality Assurance, aka OQA, for approval. This will start the initial OQA review process. Please note that multiple rounds of review may be necessary, and each review round can take up to a month. Your grant manager will collaborate with OQA to ensure approval of your QUAP. OQA will send back the requested modifications to your document back to your grant manager, which your grant manager will send to you. Once you have made all the edits requested by OQA, your grant manager will send it back to OQA for the review of your second draft. Be aware that this process may take several drafts before OQA deems it acceptable. Once all requested OQA modifications have been made, you will need to submit a final PDF of your QUAP to your grant manager with all necessary external signatures. Your grant manager will then sign the QUAP and obtain OQA's signature. Once OQA has signed the QUAP is considered approved. When the QUAP is approved, you may begin your data collection. Before we move on, there are just a couple things I wanted to note for you guys to keep in mind. Please know that the QUAP process can take as long as 3 to 4 months. This requires you to plan your project timeline accordingly. Also, please submit your QUAP draft as a Word document directly to your grant manager via email. Appendices should also be provided as PDFs via email. QUAP drafts should not be submitted on Sage. Lastly, the grantee is responsible for collecting all required internal signatures. Once these signatures are collected, the grant manager will obtain the NJDEP's internal signatures. The last signature on the QUAP is always OQA's. As previously discussed, it is important to recognize what activities require the need for a QUAP. If this is overlooked, it could cost additional time and money in the grant process. To share a real-life scenario, when corresponding with one of our grantees, they sent us lab results from soil sampling that was conducted for their project. To ensure that the data was collected in a consistent and reliable manner, we went to compare these results to an approved QUAP. Soon after, we realized that they never obtained a QUAP for this project. After realizing this, we reached out to the grantee and informed them that first, they will need to obtain a QUAP, and second, all work associated with the QUAP-related activities cannot continue until a QUAP is written and approved. This process, as mentioned earlier, can take up to 3 to 4 months, meaning that any aspect of their project associated with the QUAP had to be put on hold. Next, we had to inform the grantee that OQA does not have the authority to approve an activity listed in a QUAP that was completed prior to the approval of a QUAP. This meant that they had to redo their original soil sampling, which caused delays in their project timeline and added additional costs. After relaying all of this information to the grantee, we sent them the DEP QUAP template to ensure that all information required would be included in their QUAP draft. The grantee then uploaded the draft QUAP to a progress report on Sage and did not inform their grant manager. As previously stated, the draft QUAP should be sent as a Word document to your grant manager's email, not on Sage. The subsequent error was that that was committed was the grantee did not utilize the DEP QUAP template. So when we received their draft, we had to send it back for revisions because they were missing required information. Again, this added additional time to the process and continued to put any QUAP-related activities on hold. It is extremely important to be diligent about whether your project requires a QUAP and acquire one as soon as possible if it does. One way to ensure that you obtain a QUAP when needed is to give your grant manager regular updates on your activities occurring within your project. These updates will allow them to identify such errors and help prevent them from occurring. On this slide, we have compiled some helpful resources that I referenced throughout the presentation. These resources can help you throughout the QUAP creation process. This PowerPoint will be published on our website for you to reference as well. And on this page, you will find the contact information for Natalie Young, as well as the Watershed Restoration Grants email. Also provided is their frequently asked questions document. Please refer to the FAQ document when you have questions regarding QUAPs. If you have a more specific question regarding your application and/or the QUAP process, you may reach out to Natalie Young and/or our Watershed Restoration Grants unit via email, and we'll respond as soon as possible. However, if you already have a designated grant manager, you should reach out to your grant manager with your individual question. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Amelia. Okay, and I just wanted to follow up with some screenshots from our website to help you to find some of the information that we just shared. I'm a visual person, so I feel like I like to share visual. Once again, thank you to Jen, Natalie, Lauren, and Amelia for presenting to us. All of the information presented can be found on our website. Here are a few screenshots of our website to help you find them. If you go to the main DEP website, you would want to look for the Watershed and Land Management Program. And then at the top of the page, you would want to hover over watershed protection, and you will see grants, and you click on that link and it will bring you here to our water quality restoration grant website. Just want to point out that you can see there is also a land resource protection link. This would take you to permitting information under land resource protection for their additional information if you had questions. Throughout our presentations, we've all included links. So if you were looking for something specific, a website, you can click on the presentation links in the PowerPoint. Our RFP document is also linked to a lot of things. We were trying to make this easy as possible for you to get these links. If you were looking for the Watershed Restoration app, you would want to click on the link that says Non-Point Source Grant, Learn More, and you click on that link and it will bring you to the Watershed Restoration app. Additionally, for more RFP information, you would click on Water Quality Restoration Grants 2025, Learn More. And that would bring you to this page. You would see this page. You can see on the right-hand side is the link for the RFP document. Here's information. If you continue to scroll down this page, this is what you will see. If you look under RFP application guidance, you will see our newly added frequently asked questions. If you click on the plus side, in this case, the SAGE application plus side is clicked on, so it becomes a minus sign, and then there's all of those blue links are the links to additional document Jen specifically presented, the budget details guide in this presentation. Our previous information session, she presented the instructions for grantees. These instructions can be found there. If you continue to scroll down, you will see the last plus sign has presentation slides. So that's where you will see we will be posting the presentation slides from today. I do believe the ones from our last presentation are already posted, and you can see our public information session 1. The video is already posted, and today's video will be added to will be added there as well. So at this time, if anybody has any questions, please click the hand button at the top of the screen. Here's our website, or you can always email questions to NPS grants, GRANTS, at njdep.nj.gov. Like I said, links are there. If you have a specific grant manager, you can reach out to your specific grant manager, or you can contact any one of us that have presented, or the general website email address. I would also like to point out that a press release was released, and the NPS grants was missing the S. So you may or may not, if you tried emailing us, it may have gotten bounced back because it wasn't a plural grants. Just wanted to let you know in case you had issues. I do believe we had a question. Bob, did you have a question for us?
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much. So I have two questions, actually. The first pertains to match. And so given that match is neither required nor part of the scoring criteria, I'm just trying to wrap my head around why would an applicant take the time and effort to incorporate match into an application?
Well, match shows commitment to the project. So that's beneficial to show us a commitment to the project, that you have other resources that are already committed to making this project work.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So I appreciate that. The second question has to do with the federal funding aspect of all of this. What are the chances at some point in the near or distant future, EPA could be clawing back any of the funding that's going to be directed toward this program?
The guidance that we've received so far from EPA is that this is Clean Water Act funding, and that, as far as we are aware, is not being, it's not going to be affected by anything. But I am not, there's no special information that I have, but this, all of the funding that is here has already been allocated to us.
Okay.
There's no funding that hasn't been allocated to us. So it's here. Previous years, some of this funding goes back a few years. Our last RFP was last released in 2022. So we have 23, 24, 25 funding moving forward. So we do not expect that to happen, but I have no guarantees. I feel like I can't guarantee that.
Okay. Thank you so much for your responses. Appreciate it.
So there was a question in the chat. I'm just going to answer it. It is, does a prospective project need to be located in a watershed-based plan area on the interactive map to be eligible? No. The answer to that is just no. It does not have to be listed in a watershed-based plan in order for you to be eligible. There are certain sections in the RFP that we've pointed out, projects like extreme weather projects, that we are prioritizing those that do not have to be watershed-based plan. However, we have stated in the RFP, so I'll reiterate it, 319 funding is, we are required as part of our guidelines that we do fund projects that are identified for implementation projects under watershed-based plan. So it's beneficial to be under a watershed-based plan, but it is not required. Does anybody else have any more questions?
I do have a quick question. I was just wondering, I know the program information. We should email the, I believe it's the NPS at dep.gov. But in regards to a proposal, I just had a few questions. Should I email that email or should I email a specific person in regards to a like a proposal kind of just like question?
Um, if you're a specific grantee, you can email. I mean, that it's basically up to you. You can email. We've all put our email addresses. You can email us. The benefit of sending it to the NPS grants at DEP is that multiple people look at it.
Okay.
So if one person is out and doesn't check their email on any given day, at least in that situation, more people are looking at it. I will
perfect.
also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just listening. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just wanted to point out, because we've gotten a couple questions about that. We, at this time, because we are open with the RFP proposal, and the RFP is open and competitive, we cannot specifically give guidance on specific proposals. We can answer questions like, do you have to be in, sorry, just using the last question, do you have to be in identified in a watershed-based plan in order to receive funding? And the answer is no. That's a pretty general question. We can't say, specifically, do you think this meets this specific requirement that's in the RFP? We can't give that guidance at this time when it's that specific, project specific.
Okay. All right, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Anthony. Well, if there is no more questions, we're going to end the call and stop videoing. Please note we will be monitoring the chat for at least the next hour. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And like I said, just utilize our links on our website and ask us questions if you have any additional questions, and look for this information to be posted as soon as possible. Thank you all for attending.